Than enough. We've been talking about the law, the principle of sowing and reaping. We're going to continue on, and we're going to be talking about that because it's such a fundamental part of life. In the book of Matthew, or book of Mark rather, the 4th chapter, we find the story that Jesus gives to us regarding the parable. And I just want to go over that story one more time so we kind of really get this ingrained in our minds as to what is happening here. This is a fundamental principle of life. And so Jesus says this: the kingdom of God is like a farmer who scatters seed on the ground. Night and day, while he is asleep or awake, the seed sprouts and grows, but he does not understand how it happens. The earth produces the crops on its own. First, a leaf blade pushes through, and then heads of wheat are formed, and finally the grain ripens. And as soon as the grain is ready, the farmer comes and the harvest it with the sickle, for the harvest time has come. And so we've been talking about you reap what you sow. Whatever you plant in your life, that is what you're going to reap in your life. And it's an incredible blessing, knowing that whatever I plant is going to be whatever I harvest. No surprises here. There's not going to be some unknown secret that somehow, some way, if I plant one thing, I'm going to get yet another. And so what we're going to do this morning is we're going to illustrate once again the power of this story. Now I have hidden under here 3 articles of fruit or vegetable. And if anyone can guess what's under here, they can have them when I'm done with them. Any guesses, anyone?
Corn.
Corn? No, sorry, you're out. No kiwi. I think this is not a, this looks like a nectarine. It's not, it doesn't have any fuzz on it, so I don't think it's a peach. We know what this is. Anybody mouth watering as soon as we see this? This is a lemon, of course. And this is a green bean. You ever tried to buy a single green bean from Walmart? I'd like to buy this green bean, please. And so I end up having to buy like a dime's worth just to get one. And so I have extra if somebody wants some. Inside of this green bean, this is a vegetable, so its seeds are a little bit different. But if we open this up, we're going to find that the seeds are inside of here, and we're going to find a little green bean seed right in here, and it's kind of moist, and so it's going to be hard to kind of peel out. But inside of here is a seed. And voila, here comes the seed. So when I plant this green bean seed, what am I going to get?
Green beans.
Green beans. Now Craig Gillum decided that he's going to come out and mess with my garden, and he's going to go mess everything up and lose it all around and thinking that I'm going to get something else. That's a cruel trick. But if I plant this green bean, I'm absolutely going to get a green bean. I'm not going to get anything other than this green bean. You see, this is what our life is about. Our life is not about circumstances. Our life is about the choices that we make. And the choices that we make are the seeds of our lives. So by the choices that we make, that is going to determine what the outcome of our life is going to be. Young people, get this message. The things that you put into your life are going to be the things that you get out of your life. The choices that you make are going to be the ones that determine your life. And when you're 30 years of age, your life is going to reflect 30 years of choices. And when you're 50 years of age, which I will be in just a couple of months, you're going to reflect, my life is going to reflect 50 years of choices. And when I'm 70 years of age, my life is going to reflect 70 years of choices. And every seed, every choice that I make is going to be another seed that I'm putting in the garden of my life. And I have the choice, I have the freedom to decide what that is going to be. No one else is going to decide my garden. No one. I decide my own garden. And the choices I make, in spite of the circumstances of my life, how I handle my choices will dictate the garden of my life. Because what I plant is what I'm going to reap. Now I have here also, let's go with the lemon. Inside of this lemon, hopefully, unless this is a, oh, see, there's no seed in here. It's a seedless, wait. Aha. Anybody's mouth watering now? Who wants the lemon? I have a lemon seed. Now, you would have to be, like we talked about last time, you'd have to be a real expert, a real nerd to know that this is a lemon seed. There's something wrong with you if you know this is a lemon seed. Okay? You spend way too much time looking at this. Does this look anything like this? Totally different. Doesn't even look like a lemon tree. I mean, who would know that there's a lemon tree in the DNA of this seed? Well, God knows it, obviously, and if you're a botanist and you really know this stuff, you know there's a lemon inside of this tree, and out of that lemon tree are going to come thousands of lemons, and out of those lemons are going to come thousands of seeds, but it's always going to be a lemon tree. I'm trying to reinforce this idea over and over again that what we plant, we're going to reap. That is a principle of life. In the book of Genesis, the very first chapter, the Bible tells us that the vegetation reproduced after its own kind. And that is set up forever. It will always be what we plant. Always. Who wants a lemon? I have 4 slices here. Anyone would like a lemon? You can. Oh, okay. Darlene wants a lemon. She's kind of a sourpuss, so she needs something to do. No, I'm just teasing. You know, she's the sweetest lady in the whole world. I'm going to get stoned doing that. Man, that's a bad choice. Anybody else want a lemon? Lemon, anyone? Okay. All right. We have another taker on lemons. Careful you don't squirt somebody in the eye with that. It's pretty juicy. Okay, now we have a little nectarine here. It's a little different kind of a seed, isn't it? If we open up the nectarine, it's not a little tiny seed. It's kind of a big seed, and it's a little harder to get out. In fact, I may just have to take the time to eat this whole nectarine so that I can get the seed of it out of here. But it's kind of it's a bigger seed. And it kind of, all of these different seeds kind of represent all the different choices that we have in life. I'm just going to have to tear this thing up to get this out of here, but that's okay. So we have a different seed. And notice we had a green bean, okay? That's a green bean seed, little tiny seed. We have a lemon seed that we saw. It's a little different seed, it looks different. And here we have a nectarine seed. And man, look at the size of this seed. You would think that this would be like a tree to a redwood or something. It's such a big seed, but it's really not. It's just the way God designed it. It's kind of a unique thing. It's a very hard seed. You bite into this, you're going to chip your teeth. Okay? But it's kind of like life. Life is made up of a variety of seeds. It's made up of a variety of choices. There is no single choice that's right for every occasion, except the fact that we have to make a lot of choices in our life. And we have to be careful about the choices that we make, because the choices that we make are going to dictate the outcome of our life. A few weeks ago, I gave the illustration that said, what if you've heard the expression that an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? You've heard that expression. What if we change a little bit and said, well, I don't believe that. Maybe rather than an apple a day, I'll have a Hershey bar a day. You know what? The first day that we have a Hershey bar, it's no big deal, right? We just eat the Hershey bar and we say, you know what? That Hershey bar didn't hurt me. Tomorrow I'm going to have 2 Hershey bars. So we set it up to 2 Hershey bars a day. And as you know, still no big deal, right? So you know what? Nothing's really happening. I tell you what, I'm going to have a Hershey bar after breakfast, and then I'm going to have another Hershey bar after lunch, and then I'm going to have another Hershey bar after dinner. What's the cumulative effect of these decisions? Diabetes, right? You know, the first week, probably no big deal. First month, maybe we notice a little something different, you know. But about the 3rd year in, our husband or wife is saying, wow, honey. I don't mean to say anything, but woo! Right? It's the cumulative effect of choices. That's what our life is like. And so the seeds that we put into our life is incredibly important about what seeds we plant. And so that's what we're going to be talking about for a little bit here, for a few weeks. The seeds that we need to plant in our life. Last week we talked about sacrifice, but I think there's a more important seed than sacrifice. And I think this is the foundational seed. And we talked about sacrifice last week because it's Memorial Day, and we talked about the sacrifices that people made. But I think the most important seed that we all start with is the seed of obedience. It's such an important seed. Francis Chan gave a funny illustration, and I'm going to try and relate it to you in a way that you would understand. Suppose I told my son Preston to go and clean his room. And so Preston says, okay. And so he comes back about an hour later and said, Dad, I want you to know that I've been thinking about what you said, and I memorized how to clean my room in Greek, and I know how to say it to you in Greek, and I'm working on the Hebrew of how to clean my room and I just want you to know that I'm really thinking about cleaning my room. In fact, I'm going to have some of my friends come over, and we're going to talk about cleaning my room. We're going to meditate, we're going to dwell on cleaning my room. Would I be thrilled with that? What was the directive? Preston, clean your room, right? And so what we do sometimes as believers is that God gives us a directive in the Scripture, and we meditate on it, and we think about it, and we massage it, and we memorize it in Greek, or maybe we memorize it in Hebrew, but yet what He's told us to do is yet undone. Obedience is a fundamental principle of success in life. If I have a job, and am I hired by someone to fulfill a job, and maybe the first day on the job, the boss says to me, I want you to move this boxes from here over to here. Now, what if I went to my boss and I said, boss, I've been thinking about what you said, and I really feel strongly that I really ought to do that what you've asked me to do. In fact, tomorrow I'm probably going to do it tomorrow when I come in. Boss would say, what? You're not coming in tomorrow because you're not doing what I asked you to do. So if we want success in life, it kind of begins from an early age. Our parents ask us to do something, and so we do it. And then that translates when we go to school. A teacher tells us to do an assignment, and we do it. And if we don't do it, negative things begin to happen. We get a bad grade, or we get a failing grade, or if it gets bad enough, we'll have to repeat a grade. It can really get bad. It can really get serious if we don't learn the law of obedience. So whether it's in the workforce, or whether it's around the home, or whether it's in school, learning obedience is a vital part of our lives. And it goes the same for God. Learning to follow what He has asked us to do brings blessing into our lives. It brings blessing into our lives. He doesn't ask us to do things just because He's God. The things that He asks us to do bring blessing into our lives. And when we act in obedience to what He has asked us to do, it's for our benefit. It's from those things that He gives us increase. The whole world was designed for increase. That is why a single seed can become a huge tree, which gives out thousands of seeds and thousands of pieces of fruit, because the whole universe was designed for increase, and your life was designed for increase. And when we stay into the obedience of God, that's how He blesses us, by us doing what He has asked us to do. The book of Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, is, and excuse me, I'm going to jump off course here in a second. Listen to what it says here. If you listen, He's given the whole law. God has. And He says, if you listen to these regulations and faithfully obey them, the Lord your God will keep His covenant of unfailing love with you, as He promised with an oath to your ancestors. Listen to what He's going to give to the people if they will just obey Him. He will love and bless you, and He will give you many children. He will give you fertility to your land and to your animals. And when you arrive at the land that He swore to give your ancestors, you will have large harvests of grain, and new wine, and olive oil, and great herds of cattle and sheep and goats. You will be blessed above all the nations of the earth. Why? Because they were staying inside of God's obedience. That's how they were going to be blessed. And when they got into trouble, it's when they quit being obedient to what God has set for them. Stop and think about this for a moment. God gave them directives on what to eat. God didn't give them directives on what to eat just because He's God. Look at the health benefits that came out of that, from what we now know. God told them not to eat pork. Eating pork 100 years ago was kind of a dangerous thing. You had to be careful that you had to thoroughly cook the pork. It was for their benefit. And so when they stayed within the covenant, their health got better. And when they stayed in the covenant, they didn't have all the sexually transmitted diseases that all the nations around them had. Because in God's plan, you're staying loyal to your wife. But in the world around them, they would set up these Asherah poles, and they would have orgies around this, and all kinds of sexually transmitted diseases would come and infest the people. But when God said, listen, you stay within my plan, you obey me, and I will bless you. And sometimes the blessing was health because they were staying within the boundaries of what God said to eat. Or maybe it was another thing. Just simply by obeying God, they were blessed. And so now we're going to go back to the story of Isaac. We find Isaac in the 26th chapter of the book of Genesis that a severe famine had now struck the land as God had, as it happened before in Abraham's time. And so Isaac moved to Gerar, where Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, lived. The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, do not go down to Egypt, but do as I tell you. Live here as a foreigner in this land, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. I hereby confirm that I will give you all these lands, and you and your descendants, just as I solemnly promised Abraham, your father. I will cause your descendants to become as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give them all of these lands, and through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. That's an awesome promise he gives to Isaac. It sounds an awful lot like the promise that he gave to Abraham, his father. Now Isaac was told, I tell you what, Isaac, do not go down to Egypt. Now Egypt, we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Egypt was where the Nile flowed through, and the Nile was fed by a lake. And so the Nile River never ran dry. There was always water in the Nile. And so whenever there was a famine, people would come to the Nile because they knew they had a source of water. And famine is always accompanied by drought. And so whenever there was a famine, it was always because there was a drought. And so they would go to the Nile, and there they would find water. And from that water, they could plant crops. But God says something to Isaac. He said, I don't want you to go down to the Nile. I want you to stay right here, and I will bless you right where you're at. Isaac planted right where God told him to plant. That was the first act of obedience. Now Isaac could have said, I understand that you want me to go, not to go down to the Nile, but like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I have a couple of kids. They're just born, I got Jacob and Esau, and I really need to look after them. And so I really think it's in our best interest of our family to go down to the Nile, because that seems more reasonable to me. God said, no. I want you to stay right here, and I will bless you. Right in the land of famine. Right when there was famine, right where there was famine, God said, you plant your seeds, and I will bless you. I can just kind of imagine Isaac out there in the fields, laying out the rows and starting to plant a seed, and everybody standing around saying, what's that guy doing? He's planting seeds. Doesn't he understand there's no rain? And as we get into the story a little bit more, starting next week, you're going to see how God blessed him immensely because Isaac was obedient. But now, there was another man who wasn't so obedient. His name was King Saul. So we have an example of obedience and God blessing obedience. But we also have a story of a guy who was rebellious. And there was consequences to that rebellion. This guy's name was King Saul. From looking at King Saul was a tall, good-looking guy. And he decided God said, you know what, I want him to be king because the people of Israel are looking for a king. We want a king. We want to be like other nations. We want a king. We want a king. And God said, no, you don't want a king. And yeah, we want a king. God said, okay, fine, you can have a king. Samuel, I want that guy there, Saul, to be king. And Saul was a tall, good-looking guy. And the Bible says that he was head and shoulders above everybody else. And so he was king for a while, and then the Lord sent a message to him and said, I want you to go down to the Amalekites. This is in 1 Samuel, the 15th chapter. I want you to go down to where the Amalekites are, and I want you to wipe them out. I got a score to settle with those guys. They gave you trouble when you came to the promised land. It's now time to pay their debt. So Saul said, cool. So he mustered up 200,000 of the men of Israel, and 10,000 men from the tribe of Judah, and he set off, and he went to the Amalekites, and God blessed it, and wiped them out. God said, I want you to kill everything. Everything. The animals, the king, everything is to be destroyed. That seems kind of harsh, and we'll leave this subject for another day of why God would ask him to do that, but please understand that Saul almost did it all right. And Samuel comes up on the scene and says, hey Saul, how you doing? I said, man, I did exactly what God asked me to do. And Samuel says, well who's that over there? I said, well, that's King, that Agag. I brought him back. But I killed everything else. And Samuel says, well, what's that sound I'm hearing? I'm hearing some bleating of lambs. Well, you know, Samuel says, I brought those back to worship. They're the finest of their animals. And I brought them back to worship God. And Samuel says, you know what? You didn't do what God asked you to do. And so Samuel is given a response. This comes from the Lord. And listen to what Samuel says. What is more pleasing to the Lord, your burnt offerings and sacrifices, or your obedience to his voice? Listen, obedience is better than sacrifice, and submission is better than offering the fat of rams. Rebellion is as sinful as witchcraft, and stubbornness as bad as worshiping idols. That's harsh. Saul almost did what he was asked to do, but he stopped short. And God's response is, rebellion is as sinful as witchcraft, and stubbornness is as bad as worshiping idols. Why did God view this so harshly? Because God cannot operate and bless in rebellion. He can only operate and bless in obedience. You remember a few months ago I told you what the Hebrew word for righteousness is. The Hebrew word for righteousness it simply means right path. That's all it means. Right path. So if we are on the path that God is on, that is the right path. If we're on some other path, that's called sin, that's the wrong path. God can't bless this because God isn't here. God's over here. And so we're over here doing our own thing, and we're being rebellious over what God has told us. He can't bless that. And all the consequences that come out as a result of our rebellion come to us because God's protection is not there. God's protection is when we are on his path, walking where he wants us to walk. So if we're somewhere other than where God is, that's sin. Because God is always on the right path. And so when God gives us directives in our lives as what to do, it's a good idea to do them. Because he can bless our life as a result of being obedient to what he has for us. The greatest example of obedience, of course, is found in Jesus Christ. That is the greatest example of obedience. And so I want to just quickly go through Romans, the 5th chapter, and I want you to get a picture of what Jesus did for us as we see him as the ultimate example of obedience, and then what we can do to follow that path. Romans, the 5th chapter, 12th verse says, when Adam sinned, sin entered the world, and Adam's sin brought death, and so death spread to everyone, for everyone's sin. This is Adam. This is the original, the first Adam. So now we're going to jump down a little bit. Verse 17. For the sin of this one man, Adam, caused death to rule over many. But even greater is God's wonderful grace and his gift of righteousness for all who receive it will live in triumph over sin and death through this one man, Jesus Christ. Yes, Adam's sin brings condemnation for everyone, but Christ's one act of righteousness brings a right relationship with God and a new life for everyone. Listen to what he says here. Because one person disobeyed God, which is Adam, many became sinners. That's us. But because one person obeyed God, many will be made righteous. Christ set before us the example of obedience. Jesus said, I only do what I see my Father do, and I only say what I hear my Father say. He didn't take things on his own. He followed exactly what his Father laid out for him to do. And because of that one act of obedience, we now have righteousness because of Christ. Paul goes on, verse 20. God's law was given so that all people could see how sinful they were. But as people sinned more and more, God's wonderful grace became more abundant. That is such a beautiful verse. That second part is God said, look, here's the problem. You've got all of this sin going on, but God's grace, that word is super abundant. The sin was in abundance, but God's grace was in super abundance. It was infinitely more. You had a world full of sin. But God's grace is greater than all of that sin. It's super abundant, and it's found because of what Jesus Christ has done for us. Because of His one act of obedience, we all now can have a relationship with God that we couldn't have if it wasn't for what Christ has done for us. So just as sin ruled over all the people and brought them to death, God's wonderful grace now rules instead, giving us right standing with God and resulting in eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. How is this possible? Even though we've been talking about obedience this morning, is it all of this possible because of our obedience? It's possible because of Christ's obedience. We're made right through Christ and through His obedience, not through ours. We've already sinned. We've already messed up. We've already broken the covenant. It's already a done deal. But because what Christ has done, God's superabundant grace can now flow into us because of Jesus being obedient. Jesus being obedient. This is one of Roland's very favorite verses. I brought it out this morning for Roland. Jesus is facing the cross. Matthew 26. And he went a little further and he fell on his face and he prayed, "Oh my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless," he says, "nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Christ faced the cross. He didn't want to go. That was not what he wanted. His flesh said, "No, I don't want to go. Nevertheless, your will, not mine." That's our story. Nevertheless. I want to finish with the story this morning, and I hope that you'll give the grace to me this morning to tell the story, that you won't think I'm trying to boast. I want to tell you the story. I think I've shared this with you before, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to tell you. A couple years ago, when the church was looking for a secretary, the Lord said, I want you to talk to Tim about that. I said, I'm going to do it. That was October. November rolls around. Lord says, "Randy, I want you to talk to Tim." I said, "No, I'm not going to be a secretary. Sorry. Got the wrong guy." December rolls around. "Randy, I want you to talk to Tim." I'm not going to do it. January rolls around. "Randy, you don't know what I have in store for you. Go talk to Tim." Nope. February rolls around. "Randy, I'm not fooling around. I want you to go talk to Tim." Okay. "Tim, I don't know how to tell you this, but Lord really need to talk to you about the secretary job." I thought Tim was going to laugh and hang up the phone. He didn't. He was gracious enough, and there's just a long pause. So let me think about that. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So Tim and I talked the next day, and we went before the elders, and the elders said, "Randy, you lost your mind. You know what it pays, right?" I said, "I know. I can't explain it. I just feel like it's the Lord wants me to do." So they said, "Well, okay, that's what you want." So I left my job that I had just received a promotion in and became the church secretary. And the day that Tim introduced me, I was standing in the back, and he said, "I just want you to know we found a new church secretary." I wanted to die. I wanted to crawl underneath the carpet and never be seen again. It was humiliating to me to say that what do you do for a living? I'm a church secretary. I didn't know. I had no idea. But I felt this is what the Lord had asked me to do. Tim nor I knew what was going to happen. We had no idea that 6 months later he was going to be going to Tennessee and that the Lord was preparing me for the church. I had no idea. I could have said no, and my life would have been totally different. And the Lord is talking to somebody here today. And maybe He's talking to several somebodies today. And He's asking you to be obedient in the area that you're really struggling with. I'm telling you, yield. I'm asking you to yield to what He's asking you to do. Because He will bless you in ways that you've never been blessed before if you'll just be obedient to what He's asked you to do. It's the first step to success in your life. All the good things that can come out of life when you learn to be obedient. You see, in our culture, we kind of fight obedience. The speed limit says 65. When we're going to Iowa, the speed limit says 65. And when I'm in Iowa, the speed limit still says 65, but I go 71. Because I can get away with it. Because the police don't pull me over and give me a ticket. And that's kind of the culture. We see what we can get away with. It doesn't work that way with God. He wants to pour so much blessing into your life that you won't be able to receive it all. But the first act is to be obedient. There's something going on in your life today that you know the Lord has really been prompting your heart. And you've been in a struggle, and you've said no, and you've said no, and you've said no. I'm telling you, say yes. Say yes today to whatever it is that He has laid on your heart. And you'll be blessed beyond measure. And keep in mind one thing, we're going to close with this. Will and the band's going to come up. When you plant a seed, sometimes it takes a little time for that seed to begin to grow and to harvest. You don't plant today and reap tomorrow. So sometimes whatever God is asking you to do, when you finally say yes to that, it may take a few months. It may even take a few years before that harvest is fully realized. But when you say yes, there will be a harvest. There will be a harvest. Would you stand and we're going to pray. Roland and the team is going to come.